Shalom in Messiah the Branch, and welcome to our study, April 16, 2014. I ask the attendance of the Holy Spirit in the presentation of this information and for each listener. We will be talking about the history of the equinox in its ancient determination and how it's understood today, and determine if the dates of the equinox have ever been changed or reset by the astronomers of Rome in 1582. The picture on the screen is an image of a site called Stonehenge in England, a site that is the most famous of all megalithic sites worldwide. These sites are found on almost every continent on Earth. Europe, Asia, South America, Central America, even North America, USA. This particular picture shows how the sun looks on the day of the equinox, shining between two large stones, weighing many tons, an immovable kind of a man constructed structure to determine what Victor Houteff termed the immovable signpost. Well, these stones don't move, and they make a good indicator of what an immovable signpost means. The sun rises due east and due west on the equinox, the autumnal and vernal equinox, every year without fail. And that's what Victor Houteff meant when he stated the immovable signpost. And this structure in England is an example of how ancient people used and determined this immovable signpost, the solar cycle. Books have been written about this and researched. Archaeologists have presented their findings in various books. This is an example of one of those books. And they describe these stone structures worldwide as an international network of sophisticated astronomical observatories that ancient astronomers created to determine solar, lunar, and planetary calendars. They even reference the writings of Enoch in reference to the site at Newgrange, I believe that's Ireland, on how they determined their calendars thousands of years ago, that possibly Enoch designed those structures, or at least some of them, some of the earliest ones. One of these sites I researched recently is called for information, is called the Equinox Project, which reveals a particular megalithic site. It's not a megalithic site, but it's a stone carving in rock to determine the equinox, which was found in eastern California, which has been well researched, based upon the same principle as Stonehenge. And his summary of that site is, as stated, our modern calendar is different than the calendar of the ancients. Our calendar is designed to serve the functions of commercial society. The basis is a Roman construct, a highly commercial society. Everywhere they conquered, the Roman calendar was initiated and pressed into service. It is as if the societies the Romans conquered had no calendar. That is not true. The calendar of the ancients was based upon the solar year. A common petroglyph notation indicating this is 4 concentric circles of a 4-ringed spiral. This is similar to what was found in eastern California in a very desolate area. The number 4 becomes important not for the sake of direction finding or direction notation, but to note the divisions important to construct the year, the 4 seasons. We can see this as functions of orbit, or the natural movements of the Earth in relation to the Sun. The ancient people probably did not have this view. The day count variation due to the acceleration and deceleration, that is, of the Earth in its orbit throughout the year, was probably quite the mystery. The changes in season was predictable with the movement of the heavens. Remember, it was these folks and their ancestors that named the constellations. They were patient observers. The techniques employed to use solar observation were advanced by the Egyptians. Their standing obelisks could have easily served as gnomons, or pointing devices, for the sun. The pointed top providing an excellent and accurate timekeeping device. How the ancients viewed this explained poorly and in a manner demeaning to the cleverness of the ancients. Inyo, or the site found in Inyo County, California, is a proof that the solar position in the sky was key. The particular site they're relating to here is it's a very long technical article written by archaeologists who carefully investigated the site at particular times of the year to determine how these people, these Native Americans, determined the cycles of the sun throughout the year. And this particular site, I'll just scroll down here to a photo, was based on etchings in rock in relation to a protruding stone that would cast a shadow on these etchings, and it would do the same, come to the same position every year at the equinoxes. This site can be this information site can be looked up. It's called the Equinox Project, and it has been heavily researched. One of the interesting points of confirmation of our commonly understood equinox times throughout the year, autumnal and vernal, is that at the equinox we have a 60-minute hour, which is the central point of the year in our hour of varying length. This truth is alluded to in John 11:9, where it states, "Are there not 12 hours in a day?" Well, our modern clock is not based on a 60-minute hour. Just as some of the early people understood, as John 11:9 states in the Hebrew culture, yes, there are 12 hours in a day, as the above verse indicates, at all seasons of the year. Sacred time after the flood was based on an hour of varying length, not a fixed hour. But the mean hour, or the average hour, and the original hour of Genesis 1 through 7 must have been a constant 60 minutes, as the 12-hour day was based upon. An hour is based on minutes and seconds. However, in our day, the modern hour is based on a fixed 60-minute hour all year long, regardless of the day and night lengths. Since it would be complicated to follow a timekeeping system using a variable hour length, particularly prior to the digital age, At the autumnal equinox and the vernal equinox, the length of the hour returns to its central point in the year, the basis of the Genesis hour, a 60-minute hour, which, by the way, works very well with a 12-hour day. So, when every information source available tells us that the day and night are equal at March 2021 and September 2022, this 12-hour period of day and night is based on the 60-minute hour exactly. There is no other time of the year this is true. This event, twice a year, confirms the time and the season of the true equinox, as Victor Houteff clearly taught in 3 Answer Book 11 through 12. Another way to confirm this finding of the central point of the year, of the 60-minute hour, is to check a sundial at the equinoxes. It's particularly true at the equator, but the sundial will read exactly noontime, or 12 noon, only in the March-April, late March, early April time period, whereas it will not throughout the rest of the year. The solar noon and the clock noon vary considerably throughout the year, but only at the equinoxes do they coincide with the markings on the actual sundial. Now, before I move into the further information on the equinox, we'll cover this: the use of history books, encyclopedias, dictionaries to search out the truth, and scientific literature relating to the equinox and sacred history, and the misapplication of Victor Houteff's statement, sound admonition, teach only that which is published, not the unpublished materials of Prophet Houteff, found in vault and circulated. And this I received from Simeon. And my question here is, did Ben Roden follow this counsel in his publishing Victor Houteff's Tract 16 in 1968? And we know that Brother Roden did publish Victor Houteff's Tract 16 manuscript found in the vault at New Mount Carmel in 1968. Counsel and warning: forbidding or disparaging the use of scholarly resources as an objective witness to the truth is an attempt to cover the truth for today, to cover the truth in context of its history in the Advent movement, and to be sure that those who would discourage and bar the use of dictionaries to determine the true meaning of words, both historical and modern meanings, if there is any variance, validating the correct use of a particular word, is certainly attempting to cover the truth, to change the meaning of words, to lose the language, as it were, to misuse words or redefine them in the moment, so as to confuse or hide the meaning of the very messages of present truth given to the Advent movement from 1844 to the present. Therefore, beware. Is there an example in the pages of inspiration, or is there a new rule for today that limits our search for truth? A single source? Well, obviously Sister Wright didn't think so, neither did Brother Houteff, Ben Roden, or Lois Roden, and I will present some examples here. In a letter written by Ellen White, she says, "Dear daughter, Mary, in-law, this week we shall commence to live in the new house. It is roomy and a very nice building. Be sure and send me that coarse material like Emma's dress. Please send that double paisley shawl. I have a plan for it. Send my plaid shawl And you may send two comfortables. Send books, red covered, Jewish antiquities, and the Bible dictionary. And then she asks, is Night Scenes of the Bible by Daniel March, published in 1869, there? Is Night Scenes of the Bible there? If so, send it. Letter 60, 1878, page 1. Obviously, Sister White had use for books outside of, even outside of Scripture, which she did use, of course, primarily. In numerous books of Sister White's, particularly The Great Controversy, which I'll use as an example, she references history books such as from Milman, History of the Jews, Book 13. I won't read all these statements. I'm just going to quickly go through and highlight the sources. Again, that's Great Controversy, page 29. This one's Great Controversy, page 35. Milman, The History of the Jews. The next one, from Great Controversy, page 60. J.A. Wiley, The History of Protestantism, that she quotes from. This next one is from J.H. Murrell, History of the Reformation in the 16th Century, Great Controversy, page 62. And Brother Houteff certainly makes use of these resources as well. I'll move through these quickly and reference only the violet-colored highlights. 20th Century Encyclopedia, Volume 3. Using objective sources to determine and prove a point of truth. Here's again 20th Century Encyclopedia, Volume 8. Standard Dictionary definition under calendar. Here he's quoting from Britannicus Encyclopedia. Here he's quoting from Gibbon's Rome, Volume 3, by Milman. Same one that Sister White quoted from. This one, the New International Encyclopedia. This one, a book called the Sabbath of Creation. And also apparently Encyclopedia Britannica, Encyclopedia Americana. Those are just certain examples. And furthermore, Ben Roden and Lois Roden use extensively Bible dictionaries, encyclopedias, commentaries, history books, all scholarly resources in the presentation of their messages throughout their literature and studies. This is common knowledge in our movement. That's why I present the caution and warning. Those who disparage the use of such resources are trying to hide something. A summary of the equinox in history. As I presented here a few minutes ago, the Equinox Project. I have a site in Eastern California that worked differently from Stonehenge, but it still has the same objective and the same presentation of the solar cycle throughout the year and the determination of it. Most history books don't give the ancients much credit for intelligence. Invariably, the orientation of monuments and ruins are attributed to Neolithic cultures who could not otherwise anticipate the start of a rainy season, the new year, or even the right time to stockpile provisions for winter. By constructing two columns, a stairway, an arch, or a shaft in a specific place, the builders made sure the sun would line up exactly within the prescribed parameters on an equinox or solstice. A reference in the Scientific American magazine. How did ancient peoples observe and measure the date of the vernal equinox if it is blocked by the sunlit sky? They discovered clever ways of marking the rising and setting points of the sun. meaning that they could determine when the equinox was getting close just by the position of the sun in the stone monument sections, such as Stonehenge. And this is another picture of it in this image here. They discovered clever ways of marking the rising and setting points of the sun. In some cases, they built monuments to refine these measurements. Stonehenge in southern England is one of the most spectacular examples of these equinox calendars. And as I stated before, this monument, this megalithic monument, was constructed thousands of years ago, BC. In Wikipedia, it states, at the time when Julius Caesar took over in Rome, the Roman calendar had ceased to reflect the year accurately. The provision of adding an intercalary month to the year when needed had not been applied consistently because it affected the length of terms of office. The Julian reform lengthened 7 months and replaced the intercalary month with an intercalary day to be added every 4 years to February. This produced a noticeably more accurate calendar, but it was based on a length for the year 365 days and 6 hours. In fact, the tropical year, or the solar year, is about 11 minutes and 14 seconds less than that. This had the effect of adding about 3/4 of an hour every 4 years. The effect accumulated from 325 to by the 325 days until by the 16th century, when the northward equinox fell on March 10 or 11. And this has nothing to do with the actual usage of the 365-day calendar. The equinox has nothing whatsoever to do with the 365-day calendar as far as actual calendation with the equinoxes and the solstices. And there's not always 91 days between all the 4 seasons, as the earlier article indicated. The equinoxes, in particular, as Victor Houteff stated, are the immovable signposts, and they're not connected to man's calendar or even the solar calendar, which came about after the flood. Brother Houteff presents the equinoxes as a correction point, a reset point, twice a year, so that people don't have to be confused and misguided by the 365-day yearly cycle. Continuing on here, so that the northward equinox would have the same date in the new Gregorian calendar as it had in the Julian calendar, March 21. 10 days were dropped so that October 5th became October 15th in 1582, when the Gregorian calendar was initiated. This reform took several centuries to spread through the nations that used the Julian calendar, although the Russian Church year still uses the Julian calendar. Those nations that adopted this calendar on or after 1700 had to drop more than 10 days. Great Britain, for instance, dropped 11. The use of the equinox that we understand today, the March and September equinoxes, were in use prior to the calendar adjustment in 1582. So Clavius, the astronomer for the Pope, Pope Gregory, did not create some kind of a new determination for the equinoxes. This equinox system has been recognized by this world and all ancient cultures for thousands of years before the calendar change of 1582. But the current counter evidence to this does not make any sense and does not present any evidence to show that the Roman astronomer Clavius actually set up some kind of a new equinox. He didn't. I won't read all of these comments here. Some of it gets technical. Here's an interesting point here, as I've stated before in previous videos. Here is a reference from the historian Josephus, the Jewish historian, in dealing with the weekly cycle. It appears that Jehu Michael's reference to the Roman poets, as well as this reference from Suetonius, is a strong indication that the seventh-day Sabbath had become more tied into Roman society than most people realize. Possibly this is one of the reasons Josephus said in his historical reference, Appian 282 through 283, the masses have long since shown a keen desire to adopt our religious observances, and there is not one city, Greek or barbarian, not a single nation, to which our custom of abstaining from work on the seventh day has not spread, and where our fasts and the lighting of lamps and many of our prohibitions in the matter of food are not observed. End quote. Now, Josephus, in some circles, was considered a traitor because he was Jewish, and he pretty much went along with the Roman view of things. But it's also been observed by historians that later in Josephus' writings he starts pushing aside his Roman glorification of his Roman captives and starts to uphold his fundamental Jewish beliefs, particularly in relation to the Sabbath. I'm going to read this statement one more time to let it sink in, because the Roman calendar, the original Roman Julian calendar, did not change the Hebrew weekly cycle. In fact, it's the other way around. Had the Jewish or Hebrew weekly cycle been changed and adapted to the Roman calendar and capitulated to the Romans, there would have been some kind of an outcry, something in the historical writings, some kind of resistance, some kind of protest by other writers, because the entire Jewish nation didn't just all of a sudden change their weekly cycle to accommodate Rome. They never did. Not a shred of evidence historical for such an event. Again, Josephus writes, "The masses have long since shown a keen desire to adopt our religious observances, and there is not one city, Greek or barbarian, not a single nation, to which our custom of abstaining from work on the seventh day has not spread, and where our fasts and lighting of lamps and many of our prohibitions in the matter of food are not observed." This statement also applies to those who teach and promulgate the lunar Sabbath theory, who say that the Sabbath doesn't fall on the day that most Sabbath keepers observe it on today, which happens to fall on the Roman Saturday. In further commentary in this article, and this is a quote, I think it's from alaya.com, "In consideration of these things, it appears to me that the Romans picked up the recurring 7-day week from the Jews, not the other way around. For 5 centuries or longer, the Romans had kept an 8-day week, with the 7 days being named by the letters of the alphabet, A through H. They did not keep a 7-day week until they came into more contact with Sabbath-keeping Jews in the early centuries BCE, before the Common Era. The fact that they named the days of the week after various planetary idols doesn't prove that they originated the recurring 7-day week. The naming of the various days after planetary idols appears to have originated either with the Babylonians or the Hindu civilization, not the Romans. And the use of the original Julian 8-day week in no way complicates this matter, because the Romans did give up the 8-day week and did not assimilate the Jewish weekly cycle from creation as it is today. We know that the Israelites came from Egypt, and that Victor Houteff says that Egypt's calendar was to be their own, which was a solar calendar, and the Egypts did use the equinoxes that we have today. In this particular article it says the center of Egyptian civilization was the Nile River, which flooded every year at the same time and provided rich soil for agriculture. The Egyptian astronomers, who were actually priests, recognized that the flooding always occurred at the summer solstice, which was also when the bright star Sirius rose before the sun. It's called the heliacal rising of Sirius. The priests were therefore able to predict the annual flooding, which made them quite powerful. Many Egyptian buildings were built with an astronomical orientation. The temples and pyramids were constructed in relation to the stars, zodiac, and constellations. In different cities, the buildings had different orientations based on the specific religion of that place. For instance, some temples were constructed to align with a star that either rose or set at harvest or sowing time. Others were oriented toward the solstices or equinoxes. As early as 4000 BC, temples were built so that sunlight entered a room at only one precise time of the year. So you see, Rome, or the astronomer Clavius, did not in any wise set up a new form of equinox. This is provable in all scientific literature, astronomical literature, and historical references. The equinox was and is universal throughout Earth's history in all Near East and Western cultures. Although numerous pagan cultures throughout history adopted the equinoxes and the solstices for their yearly agriculture calendar to know the seasons, a solar calendar, out of necessity, a constant food production cycle, this in no way invalidates the use of the equinox of March and September of the current calendar system in the scriptural context of the Israelites, even from before their time in Egyptian captivity. Various rod statements make this clear. This is Victor Houteff, Answer Book 311. Beginning its first month of the year with the first new moon at or after the vernal equinox, March 2021, it puts the 14th day, that on which the Passover lamb was to be slain, on April 3, the 3rd of April. Once for all, it is seen the utter impossibility of the Roman months having the slightest thing to do with fixing the time of either the Passover or the sheaf offering, and thus not the slightest thing to do with the reckoning the time of either the crucifixion or the resurrection of Christ. So here Brother Houteff in this statement tells us that the 14th day of the first month falls on, I would say, at or about April 3rd every year. From 13 Symbolic Code 9 and 10, he further states, since Moses and the people whom he led out led out knew of no other than the Noahic and Egyptian calendars, and since God corrected only the time in which the year was to begin, he thus revealed that, aside from the time in which the new year was to commence in Egypt's measuring time, aside from the time in which the new year was to commence, Egypt's measuring time was to be theirs too. He even approved of the Egyptian names of the months, as it is seen from the fact that the month Abib, Egypt's name of the calendar, the day it began and the day it ended, was chosen to be their first month of the year, Exodus 12:2 and 13:4. Moreover, the Jews also used in their calendar the Medo-Persian or Babylonian months in place of the Hebrew numbers of the months. The Medo-Persian Nisan, Egypt's Abib, the Jews took for their year's first month, Iyar for the second, Sivan for the third, and so on, 4 of which are recorded in the Bible. Stating the references here: Abib, Ziph, Ethanim, Bo. The Jews could not have used the Egyptian and Medo-Persian names of the months interchangeably if the months were not parallel with the Hebrew months. Furthermore, we have already seen from history's record, too, that Egypt's week was the same as the Hebrew week. Note, this being so, the Lord said nothing about the week or the month. Still further, the calendar which the prophets used in both the Old and New Testaments was not lunar, but solar. For example, in Noah's time, 150 days equaled 5 months, 30 days to a month, Genesis 7 and Genesis 8. In Daniel 7:25 and Revelation 12:7, also in Revelation 12:14, times, and dividing of times. 3.5 years are interpreted in Revelation 12:6, 13:5 to be 1260 days, or 42 months, 30 days to a month. Heaven's way of measuring time is, therefore, not lunar, but solar. End quote. And I emphasize here, in other words, or summarized, quoting Victor Houteff, heaven's way of measuring time is therefore solar. Now, we have learned recently from New Mount Carmel that the true calendar, the original calendar given to Moses, and that we should be following now, and the calendar given to Enoch that we should be following now, is neither solar nor lunar. Well, Victor Houteff states very plainly here, the calendar is solar. And there's a reason for that, not using the moon at this time, because the moon has been, its orbit has been greatly changed. It does not rule the night, except essentially at the full moon, when it rises right after sundown and sets just before sunrise. Every full moon. I want to explore this idea on this thought in contrast to what's being said at New Mount Carmel now, that the true calendar is neither solar nor lunar. But again, Victor Houteff disagrees with that concept. And Scirpture disagrees with it as well, as we will see here. Here's Victor Houteff's chart, where he's using the autumnal equinox and the vernal equinox, and the solstices, based upon the solar days. A testimony, a very interesting testimony here that I discovered in recent weeks, based upon the Great Pyramid, which apparently is being spoken of in Isaiah chapter 19, verses 19 through 20, which states, "In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to Yahuwah. and it shall be for a sign and for a witness. I call it a pillar of testimony. A witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. For they shall cry unto the Lord because of the oppressors, and he shall send them a Savior, a great one, and he shall deliver them. Well, this pillar of testimony is at the border of Egypt, in the Nile Delta, and it is the only remaining structure of the ancient world, one of the only remaining of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. I discovered recently that this structure that has been carefully researched by archaeologists, mathematicians, and astronomers has some dates indicated through its measurements which are in harmony with 3 Answer Book 11 statement, where Brother Houteff states that the date of Passover is April 3rd, or it was the equivalent of April 3rd in our present-day calendar in AD 31. This inscription, this chart is from a book. I didn't create it. You can look it up online, the Christ Triangle. The measurement from the beginning of the ascending passageway in the Great Pyramid to the beginning of the Grand Gallery is set at April 3rd, AD 33. The date of the crucifixion, according to these archaeologists and researchers, mathematicians that originally explored the pyramid for scientific purposes back at the turn of the century of the early 1900s and late 1800s. We even find the 1844 date in this structure, which is not normally talked about because it's in Adventism, because it's the topic is too esoteric. The structure is too misunderstood. It was never used as a burial chamber for a pharaoh. But it is interesting that this particular chart in books, in almost any book you can pick up concerning the pyramid, particularly from the Merrimack publishers back in Boston, fixes the crucifixion date to April 3rd, AD 33. Interesting. That's a view. Here's a view inside the pyramid. This top section is the king's chamber. This long structure that ascends to the king's chamber is called the Grand Gallery. The beginning of this Grand Gallery, this structure right here, it is determined by measurements to be 33 AD, or adjusted time in our present calendar as 31 AD. This little section here at the bottom is the ascending passageway that transitions into the Grand Gallery. This structure here off to the left is called the Queen's Chamber, and there is a deep spiritual significance to that in the Gospel as a chronograph of the Gospel account as to who was left behind at 33 AD or 31 AD, depending on the calendar adjustment. In conclusion, in reference to a video put out by Charles Pace recently, 328:14, where he states the Creator's calendar is neither solar nor lunar. This video is an answer to Tom Caldwell, who just put out his version of the solar calendar. He asked for feedback, so I thought I would send him an email with my advice to help him get out of the ditch he had gotten himself into. I hope he takes my advice to heart and sees how foolish it is to follow a calendar set up by sun worshippers for their sun worship. The strong arguments upholding the Creator's calendar are also discussed to reestablish and reaffirm what the Creator had established, etc. Let us see if this is so, as we've just read from Victor Houteff, where he says, "Heaven's way of measuring time is, therefore, not lunar, but solar." Now, why did Victor Houteff state this? Did he not know what he was talking about? And why is this so? Let's take a look in Genesis chapter 1 as we come to our conclusion here. Genesis 1:1 states, and I'm going to read through these verses quickly to make a point, up to verse 16. "In the beginning God created the heaven and earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." This of course is the divine light, not natural light, but divine light. Just as was stated by Charles Pace. Verse 4, "And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness." Verse 5, "And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day." Okay, there's an evening and a morning. Verse 6, "And God said, 'Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters.' Verse 7, "And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so." Verse 8, "And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day." Okay, that's important, the evening and the morning. The presence of light and the absence of light, the evening and morning. Charles asserts that this is referencing equinox or twilight times, not actual sunrise and sunset times. Of course, the sun wasn't created yet. So evening and morning is referring to the presence of light or the absence of light, or the 24-hour cycle. Verse 9, "And God said, 'Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear.' And it was so." Verse 10, "And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, 'Let the earth bring forth grass, the herbs yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth.' And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day." Now here we're still dealing with divine light. The two lights in the heavens haven't been created yet. So we have a example of a 24-hour period for each day, indicating what was done on that day, marked by the evening and the morning. Now this is the dividing line. Verse 13. Here is the division in the Genesis narrative from the divine light to the natural light, or the natural movements of the earth and the sun, or in relation to the sun. Verse 14, "And God said, 'Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years.'" Let there be lights to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs, for seasons, for days and years. This is further described in the next few verses. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. Now, verse 16, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Now here we have the same evening and morning, only this time the Creator ordains natural light, the natural movements of the sun-earth relationship, for, as it says here in verse 14, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Was Victor Houteff right about the two great lights? Of course, he's using only the greater light, as Revelation 12 indicates, the woman with clothed with the light of the sun. Was Victor Houteff right in establishing the light of the sun as the ruler of the day? Anyone who states that the calendar is not based on solar or lunar really doesn't know what he's talking about, and is presenting a false calendar based upon false principles, based upon a personal determination of what constitutes the truth. And my question here is, either the lights in the heavens, particularly the sun, are for these determinations of the day, the week, or the daily cycle, which works out to the weekly cycle, and for the Moedim, which is the word seasons here in verse 14. Either these lights are used for this purpose or they're not. Which is it? Genesis 1:14 states that they are used for this purpose. And to be able to use a strictly a calendar based strictly on a equinox that has never been determined to be the signpost, the immovable signpost, in February rather than March, or to state that the sun light itself, the actual presence of the sun in the sky, is not to be used for this purpose, is just falsehood. Verse 16, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. So obviously, as Brother Houteff states after the flood, that heaven's calendar is not lunar but solar. Victor Houteff's statement is in harmony with Genesis 1:14 and 1:16. And to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. I say, using the solar in our present calendar situation after the flood, I say that it's good, in agreement with the Creator. Verse 19, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So now we have the use of natural light in the determination of the calendar system. It continues through the remainder of the creation week. The evening and the morning were the fifth day. And the sixth day, evening and the morning were the sixth day. In concluding this study, I would like to make a brief review of Sister White's comments on the Mark of the Beast, as I covered in part 1 of this video series. In reference to Psalm 11:3, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? I won't read this whole statement, just the last part of it. As men then rejected the institution which God had declared to be the sign of his authority and honor, in its stead that which Rome has chosen as a token of her supremacy, they will thereby accept the sign of allegiance to Rome, the mark of the beast. And it is not until the issue is thus plainly set before the people, and they are brought to choose between the commandments of God and the commandments of men, that those who continue in transgression will receive the mark of the beast. Greek Controversy 88. In 7 Bible commentaries, she states, when the test comes, it will be clearly shown that the mark of the beast, or what the mark of the beast is. It is keeping of Sunday. Now, Charles has stated that he doesn't like to be referenced as observing Sunday. Well, and yet he references those of us who keep the Sabbath the day before Sunday, on the seventh day, as Saturday keepers. Well, Charles, if you don't want us to reference you as a Sunday keeper, don't reference us as Saturday keepers. I'll use the same language as Ellen White used, based on what she understood the weekly cycle to be, that the mark of the beast is the keeping of Sunday, or the first day of the week, without any confusion of the topic or the issue as a deception of identity theft by the apostate church. Next she says, the sign or seal of God is revealed in the observance of the seventh-day Sabbath, the Lord's memorial of creation. The mark of the beast is the opposite of this, the observance of the first day of the week. In other words, Sunday. In the issue of the contest of all Christendom will be divided into two great classes, those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, and those who worship the beast and his image and receive his mark. Although church and state will unite their power to compel all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive the mark of the beast, yet the people of God will not receive it. The prophet of Patmos beholds them that had gotten the victory over the beast and over his image and over his mark and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having harps of God and singing the song of Moses and the Lamb. For those who are listening to this, I pray you'll consider this evidence, and I'll leave it there for now. Thank you for your attention. Shalom.